Welcome to another installment of Where Was God? And we know this subject is related to God. We're going to take a look at what caused the shooting, or what could be the cause, because we know good old Joe and his cabinet is not going to look into it. Uh, Basically, since the shooting, only a couple hours a day, not even 2 days after the shooting, the media, the airwaves, the internet's all been flooded with, I'd say, I've seen close to 100 comments of people justifying the shooting. Well, that's sick. I mean, where is this all coming from? Let's take a step back and let's speculate for a moment with a theory. You know, these theories have been coming true for 2.5 years now. Uh, the people in the government, Joe, his cabinet, all the Democrats, The View, all the other shows like that, all the leftist news media, they got the easiest jobs in the world. They're collecting huge salaries, and guess what? Everything that they are reading is scripted. By who? I would say the globalists. The globalists are trying to cover something up. What is that something? Well, the House right now is holding hearings on Hunter Biden's laptop. The House has accumulated all the records they need on Joe Biden's dealings with China. Is that what they're trying to hide up? I mean, right now they could impeach Joe Biden in a nanosecond. What are the globalists trying to cover up? And, you know, what could be so important to cover up that they're willing to go out and have 3 children and 3 adults slain? I mean, this is sick. And then, on top of that, they release these scripted comments by, let's say, 100 voices on social media, The View, the news services, and the Democrats are making the same damn speeches justifying the shootings. It just seems beyond all comprehension. Nobody's even taking a moment to look at it and say, well, okay, with what we've got, can we figure out what was the cause? And I decided, okay, I'm praying all day long. The Lord says, take a look at the drugs. That's one of the things we got to take a look at. That's one of the things we got to investigate anyway. So let's start taking a look at those drugs. Well, the first one I'm going to look at, because I'm going to be fair, I'm not going to be biased, we're going to take a look at the trans line, which is, okay, I don't have to explain where this information is coming from. In transgender men, or trans masculine people, the most common medication used for transition is testosterone. Well, okay, so they got this article and they go through a couple of little things about, you know, the changes in the body and development of typical male secondary sex characteristics, and they try to paint this all. Okay, we suspect they're not going to have all of the information on here, but they talk about, you know, most of the things that you would find on. I also checked the Mayo Clinic. A lot of this information is off the Mayo Clinic and some other credible sources. I like sticking with credible sources. But one of the things they get down to is in these parentheses down here, e.g., inability to cry, increased anger. So basically, you know, they're admitting that these drugs to change your sex are going to increase your anger. Okay, does that have anything to do with the shooting we just saw in Nashville? Of course it does. You know, these people are trying to justify it. One of the things they're trying to cover up is the drugs that they are taking are one of the causes. I went through this, and it's not the only cause. Wait until we get to the end. But the drugs are a major contribution to that woman finally snapping and going back to a school that she went to and just indiscriminately shooting Christians. That was her goal. What made her so angry? We have to look into that. Well, once we start getting into the Mayo Clinic, we start getting a little bit more information out of this. In transgender woman or trans feminine people, you see the other website, the trans website, they just sort of mix everything together. Like, you know, it doesn't matter if you're switching from one to the other, it's basically the same thing. The Mayo Clinic gets into some more details, let's say. The most commonly used medications are estrogens and androgens. Then it goes into the administration, and it tells you what you're going to get. You're going to see breast growth, softer skin. These effects are largely reversible. So if you're going to try changing into a woman, you can hopefully change right back. I don't know. I wouldn't try it. Some trans women also describe changes in emotions, e.g., more tearful, as well as decreased libido. That's basically a sex drive. Adverse effects can also include increased risk of thrombosis. There's all these different diseases and all of this stuff. Basically, whenever you take these drugs, you increase your risk of catching a whole long list of diseases. Now, the overview. Masculizing hormone therapy typically is used by transgender men and non-binary people to produce physical changes in the body that are caused by male hormones during puberty. These changes are called secondary sex characteristics. Secondary. You know, I mean, you're changing this stuff for life, but let's soften it up a little bit. Masculining hormone therapy also is called gender affirming hormone therapy. You know, they always try to put this really good spin on it. Masculining hormone therapy involves taking a male hormone testosterone. Now, if you've ever been to the gym and you've seen people that, you know, really want to work out and they're going to wind up cheating a little bit by taking some drugs, testosterone, steroids, you can see the mood swing in them. I mean, it's inevitable that if you know the people and they start taking these things, you can see the mood swings in them, and they develop a short fuse. Their anger just snaps automatically with the smallest thing. So they're introducing their patients to this kind of stuff. All right? And then you wonder why they're coming up with all these comments and doing all these stupid things like trying to justify a school shooting. Virtually all of these children have other mental health comorbidities going on, and the children showing up at gender clinics today do not have traditional gender dysphoria that starts from a very young age. Comorbidities is basically it's like inducing something, making something worse than what it was. These are primarily girls who are just having a tough time in puberty. They are depressed, anxious, have experienced trauma or abuse, and are being sold a lie that they might be born in a wrong body and really have a boy brain. This entire ideology relies on sexist, regressive stereotypes. If a child isn't fitting into the stereotype norms, they are becoming convinced this means they are transgender. Now, when you look at credible websites, they basically come out and cover stuff that you're not going to find on the trans website. What we should be telling these children is that there is no right way to be a boy or a girl. If a girl is a tomboy, great. It doesn't mean she's an actual boy. I mean, there's some common sense information out there that we can get into, that if you're facing these problems, you're going to do some home counseling or something, look at it. A huge percentage of these kids are on the autism spectrum. They have other conditions that can be treated or dealt with, and there's experts, there's all kinds of progression, all kinds of science, all kinds of improvements on dealing with autism. But when you start telling them they can change their sexes, that basically has a real negative effect. And what that does is it actually magnifies their problems. And basically that's what the left is doing. They're magnifying the problems and forcing them into making a decision, or in a lot of cases, when we look at the fact that, it's not unusual for these kids to have trauma or suffer from abuse. And we got to look at that. Are the parents really the contributing factors to their confusion, to their anxieties, to their depression? And then come on, people that are going to wind up forcing a child into a sex change are not playing with a full deck. And when they start forcing these inadequacies onto their children, that's an abusive environment. Well, then we get into the hormones and everything they're taking. We can get into a little bit more on there. Lupron is a gonadotropin releasing hormone used to treat prostate cancer, breast cancer, and urine fibroids. It has been used in the past for chemically castrate pedophiles. It is now being used off-label, having never been approved by the FDA or Health Canada. A lot of these articles jump right into Canada because in Canada they've already legalized this stuff and they're paying for it with tax dollars up there to stop puberty in kids who want to change their sex. It stops production of testosterone in boys and estrogen in girls. So they've got a chemical that works, but as we can see, there's drawbacks. There's one case that a little girl suffered spinal fractures, and it also results in chronic pain and everything. You're basically, not only are they stopping, these sex organs or the breast or whatever, the things that make a boy and a girl, they're not only stopping that, but they're stopping bone growth and other things. Who knows what it's doing in the digestive system or even the brain matter for that one. And this article too also talks about when you introduce children to these Lupron drug, it increases the mental problems, the anguish, the anxiety, and the depression that they're already dealing with. It actually increases them. It doesn't do anything to help solve the problem. You're just creating another one. But that's typically what drugs do. We know the drugs that the drug companies are pushing. And they just happen to be pushing these because they're getting the government to pay for them again. And then we've got the general evaluation, the general summary. And this is both on the articles for Mayo Clinic for both males and females transferring over. You also might have a behavioral health evaluation by a provider with experience in transgender health. And the evaluation may assess gender identity, gender dysphoria, mental health concerns, sexual health concerns. I mean, realistically, when we're talking about children really shouldn't be having sexual health concerns in the first place. And then it goes on, gender identity at work, risky behaviors such as substance use or use of unapproved silicone injections, hormone therapy, or supplements. Support from family, your goals and expectations, and care planning and follow-up care. Well, this is basically suggestions from studies at the Mayo Clinic, what you should go through an evaluation before you consider any kind of drugs or surgery. One of the things that I've seen in these studies is the fact that when you're dealing with the trans community, a major portion of the trans community is also involved in cocaine and methamphetamines. So what does that do when you start mixing different drugs with these drugs that change your body? Obviously, common sense would tell you it's not going to turn out well. So we're gonna take a look at some of these things that what do they need to watch out for? Well, methamphetamine exists as one of the most addictive drugs on the market with no known medical purpose to its name. We got to realize that this fentanyl coming over the border and all these designer drugs and all this other stuff that Joe hasn't been doing a damn thing about is fueling this whole crisis that we have here that's resulting in school shootings, and he's pointing a finger at the AR-15s again. He calls them assault weapons. Well, hate to tell you, Joe, but you and your cabinet are completely brain dead, and you're not even going to consider looking at anything else. You know why? Because your damn handlers, the globalists, didn't put it in the script. In effect, this drug stimulates signal communication between the brain's neurons and the circuits to the point where it depletes virtual neurotransmitter chemical supplies over time, according to the National Center for Biotechnology Information. Methamphetamine addiction causes widespread damage to the brain and body structures, diminishing a person's overall physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Well, here we go. These drugs already put you at risk, and your body's going to break down, your body's going to lose its immune system, your body's going to be, at risk for every single disease and everything that's coming down the tubes. If we look at the whole big picture, we got the damn government paying people to develop viruses and release them on their own population, and now they're giving these people not only drugs that change their sexes and lower their immune system, they're bringing in tons and tons of methamphetamine, enough to kill the nation over 10 times, that lowers their immune system. Does any of this stuff make sense? I mean, come on, Washington, wake up. I'm sick and tired of hearing these people, and especially when these people are trying to justify the slaying of 6 people in Nashville, and they're completely ignoring this situation. This is all basic. This is, okay, under the influence of methamphetamine, individuals are less likely to use condoms, more likely to have sexual encounters with strangers whose health issue is unknown, and more likely to engage vigorous, unprotected vaginal and or intercourse with multiple sex partners. Recent studies indicate that among gay and bisexual men, methamphetamine is associated with higher risk of HIV positivity, unprotected anal receptive sex, all kinds of other stuff. I don't need to go into details, but this methamphetamine has widespread results that until we start reading this stuff, we really don't realize it. And it's making matters worse on every single level. And the thing about it is, you got these globalists convincing these people that have less than half a brain. We read reports, it affects the brain, that, they have to war against God. They have to war against Christians that believe in God. They can't coexist with the majority of the people on earth. Psychological effects. Methamphetamine addictions create a state of chemical imbalance that inevitably affects the brain's limbic system, which regulates a person's emotional states. As the brain operates off a delicate balance of chemicals, abnormal increases in dopamine set off a chain reaction that disrupts other neurotransmitter chemical outputs. As a result, the psychological effects of methamphetamine addiction take many forms, some of which include depression. Okay, aren't these trans people, especially the ones making the videos justifying the shooting, aren't they exhibiting signs of depression? Anxiety disorder symptoms, breakdown in logic and decision-making abilities, loss of impulse control, violent or aggressive behavior display, confusion. These effects only worsen in intensity for as long as a person remains addicted to the drug. So basically, I think that pretty much sums it up. It just explained everything that we see these people suffering from on The View, on the left media, coming out of Washington, D.C. It was just summed up in one page. Understanding meth rage. Does meth make people violent? Meth addiction can change a person in ways never thought imaginable, including inducing what's known as meth rage. Becoming violent while using meth is scary for everyone, including the user. Meth can make you do things you would never do under normal circumstances, so it's no surprise that meth increases incidents of violence. Now, has that shooter in Nashville been tested for drugs? And what about all these people that get pulled over, by the police, and you see in the videos, they're not acting rational. Are they on drugs? And it's always, what? The fault of the police officer. I guess the obvious question to ask at this point is, how many people in Washington are we paying with our tax dollars that are on these drugs? Aren't they acting as irrational as described in the studies? And what about the people on social media? We already can pretty much tell they got to be on something to talk that way. And the leftist media isn't far behind them, and The View is probably leading the charge. What about the globalists that are writing these scripts? They must be on something. At any rate, God sees all of it. God knows who's in charge and who they're all feeding and who the devil's all working with. And basically, I think the best thing we can do right now is sit back and wait for orders from God, because if we try solving this problem ourselves, we know we're only going to make it worse. We've already had the opportunity to live through 2 years and see what the diversified cabinet and all these drugs coming in over the border and everything, how they affected the whole country. We don't want to make it worse. So let's pray.